even though Russian President Vladimir Putin realized his error on the very first day of the conflict. He did not back down and give up the fight. Putin's 23 years in control have not seen him make such a significant error in judgment. He succeeded in bringing to everyone's attention how terrible of a tragedy the conflict. The cost of the Russia-Ukraine conflict, which has just finished its first year, has been estimated to be $2 trillion. According to recent reports, Moscow has officially declared war. Dmitry Medvedev, a former prime minister of Russia, has asserted that his country will be destroyed if it calls an end, stated that the United States is actively working to defeat Russia, and then went on to say if the United States desires Russia's defeat, it is obvious that we are on the verge of a global conflict. If the United States of America wishes to be victorious over Russia, we have the legal right to defend ourselves with any weapon, including nuclear. If Russia were to call off the operation before it had achieved victory, the country would cease to exist and crumble into fragments. The conflict will come to an end if the United States stops providing weapons to the regime in Kiev. Russian spy caught in Poland. According to statements made by Polish authorities on Thursday, a Russian citizen who has been living and working in Poland for a significant amount of time has been suspected of acting as a spy for the Russian government between the years 2015 and April 2022. The individual who was charged with espionage was taken into custody in April, amid evidence that he had gathered information on the military readiness of the Polish armed forces and NATO forces, and then passed it on to the Russian intelligence service. The suspect's espionage activity was focused on military units located in the northeastern part of Poland, where the Polish armed forces is conducting reconnaissance missions, said the spokesperson for the Gdańsk District Prosecutor's Office in a statement that an indictment was submitted to the Gdańsk District Court last week. In addition to this, corruption crimes associated with the individual surface, according to reports. This investigation is just one of several that are presently being carried out by prosecutors in relation to activities carried out by Russian and Belarusian intelligence services against the Polish armed forces. Russian military aircraft shot down. It was reported that a fighter aircraft of the Type Tu-25 belonging to the Russian Air Force had crashed and the pilot was killed. According to a statement issued by the Russian Ministry of Defense, a fighter jet of the Su-25 type that had finished its assignment and was returning to the airport in the Belgorod region was the cause of the accident that occurred there. The cause of the disaster is not yet known. However, it was mentioned that a technical issue may have been the reason why the plane went. The ministry reported that there was no damage to the surrounding area as a result of the aircraft crashing into an empty field, but the pilot did pass away as a result of the incident. Multiple assaults have been launched against the Bera region along the frontier with Ukraine. Ever since the beginning of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, howitzers from the Ukrainian army destroyed a number of Russian administrative buildings in the Belgorod. Who do you believe was responsible for shooting down the Russian plane? What's going on at the front? According to Kirill Obov, the head of the main directorate of intelligence for the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense, the adversary is no longer able to supply his army with equipment. He also stated that already underway is the massive Russian offensive that they intend to use to achieve their object. However, in order for no one to discover its existence, it must be kept in complete secrecy and be of an exceptionally high standard. They were tasked with the mission of reaching the administrative boundaries of the Danes and Lagios regions by the 31st of March. OV stated that they recruited 316,000 soldiers into the Russian army after Russia's first proclamation of mob. He went on to say that more than 90% of those soldiers were immediately sent to the front lines without receiving any training. Only a small portion was allocated to the creation of new units, while the vast majority was used to replenish existing units, all of which had incurred casualties on the front lines. Russian military don't even have equip, according to OV, who claimed that Russia was unable to provide the forces with armored vehicles and tanks, and that statements made regarding the production of 800 tanks per year were nothing more than empty words. They do not have enough armored vehicles. Even their warriors aren't being provided with weapons and ammunition by them. The Russian military is sending its troops into battle unprepared. Even armored personnel carriers are. They utilized 60% of their available apparatus. Nothing can be accomplished by them. The Russian soldiers are unable to progress. In February, analysts speculated that Russia would initiate a fresh onslaught in the Donbass. The fact that Russia has incurred losses is an indication that the major assault has started, but the Russian forces have not shown any signs of success so far. The only thing that Russian warriors are successful at is dying quickly. On February 21st, the president of Ukraine, Zelensky, made an announcement that despite the massive attacks that were being launched by the Russian invaders, there had been no change in the front line and the Russians were unable to make any advancement. Alexei Diallo, the secretary of the Security and Defense Council, also acknowledged that the Russian armed forces have not made any advancements in eastern Ukraine since the beginning of their so-called Great Offensive. China's military expenditures have seen a record increase. The conflict in Ukraine caused Russia to suffer a substantial loss of military power, including the majority of its newest and most advanced equipment, according to the findings of a report titled Arms 2023 that was published by the International Institute for Strategic Studies, IISS. According to the report, Ukraine thoroughly modernized its armed forces with the assistance of the armed forces of other countries, whereas China experienced an increase in military spending that was unprecedented. It was stated in the report, which accorded a significant amount of weight to the conflict in Ukraine, which Russia compensated for its military losses with the announced mobilization. But it was emphasized that the newly arrived soldiers lacked prior combat experience. Russia's tank arsenal is melt. According to the report of the institution that detailed the destruction of the Russian tank fleet, approximately half of the T-72 and T-72 model tanks as well as the majority of the T-80s were lost. As a result of these devastating losses, the Russian army was forced to deploy older pieces of equipment in order to make up for the short. Was found to be operational. According to the findings of the institute, Russia suffers losses of between 10 and 15% of certain kinds of aircraft, and between 6 and 8% of its tactical warplanes. In light of the fact that Ukraine has a smaller number of warplanes, but has experienced proportionally more losses, the institute came to the conclusion that Kiev has lost approximately half of its inventory of tactical warplane. Ukraine modernized its weapons. It was emphasized in the report that tanks from the Soviet era that were supplied by Eastern Europe, which competed for more modern equipment, were also shipped to Kiev. The report noted that Ukraine, which greatly benefited from weapons stocks left over from the era of the Soviet Union, increased its combat capabilities by initiating a transformation in its army with the supply of ground weapons from Western countries. It was noted in the report that almost 20 of the NATO member countries had announced either an immediate increase or a long-term increase in their defense expenditures or defense expenditure objectives. It was pointed out in the report that there was an unprecedented 7% increase in China's defense budget in 2022 compared to the previous year. The report also stated that the modernization efforts of the Chinese army are a significant concern for the USA, Turkish, and Iranian drones fighting in. Iran provided a significant number of unmanned aerial vehicles, UAVs, to Russia, which was unable to stop the Bar-Actor UAVs at the front. Russia was unable to accomplish the victory they desired when they put Bar-Actor UAVs up against Iranian-made UAVs on the front lines. In the midst of the ongoing fighting in the eastern parts of Ukraine, European authorities disclosed that Russia's stock of armed drones manufactured in Iran is rapidly diminishing. The use of drones by Russia in its conflict with Ukraine is being scaled back, according to authorities from European nations. In December, the Ukrainian government made the announcement that Russia had acquired 250 drones from the accomplishments of Turkish unmanned aerial vehicles. UAVs have been recognized all over the globe. How powerful do you believe Turkish unmanned aerial vehicles, UAVs, are? People in Ukraine have been living in a metro station for a year. Some people in Ukraine have been forced to take refuge in public transportation hubs for the past year due to the ongoing conflict in the country's different regions. Since the beginning of the conflict, civilians living in large cities like Kiev and Kyiv have consistently fled to metro stations in order to escape the bombing attacks carried out by Russian forces. In the early days of the conflict, the metro stations, which were used as safe havens by thousands of people seeking protection from the conflict, were transformed into subterranean cities. Reporters were able to speak with residents of Ukraine who had spent an entire year residing in the Kyiv metro station and hear about their experiences. Dozens of people who have been without a home or who do not dare to stay at home for reasons of safety continue to live in tents that have been set up in caves. Certainly a metro station in the city, which is located in an area where Russian air attacks have continued until today, albeit with a lesser degree of intensity than they have in Yuko, who has been staying at the metro station with her daughter, who is 17 years old since the first day of the war, stated that she has not been able to reside at home for an entire year because of the conflict. Get up. The war has started, Michael and co. stated in reference to the detonation that took place on the first day of hostilities in Kyiv since the 24th of February in the year 2022. We have made our home in this metro station. Living in the city is a dangerous choice because violent crime can break out at any time. In his statement, Michael Linko referred to the day of the assaults and said the morning of February 24th was marked by the sound of explosion. After stepping out onto the terrace, I noticed smoke rising from various locations. I aroused my daughter from her sleep and informed her, get up. The war has started, Michael Lanko stated in reference to the fact that they had gotten to the metro station by removing suitcases and other items from the residence. Since then, my daughter and I have been residing in this location. We currently have no plans to travel anywhere at this Wagner danger on a daily basis. We continue to report on all of the breaking news regarding the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, both on the battlefield and in the diplomatic arena. When we take a step back and look at the overall situation as well as the developments that are interconnected with one another, we can see that some previously concealed knots are being untied, one by. In this report, we will decode the clandestine civil conflict that has been raging in the Russian army because all of the secrets that Russia has been keeping are starting to come out. What factors contribute to the regular turnover of leadership in the Russian armed forces, and why does this occur? What is behind Kadyrov's decision to launch a private military? Will Putin prevent the Wagner Group from conducting business in the captured territories? Let's take a look at what's been going on in the Russian army as of late, which is gearing up for the impending civil war that's going to spill out under the streets of Russia in the not-too-distant future. Let's get started. Right now, it is common knowledge that mercenaries of the Wagner Group, Chechen fighters, and Russian personnel in the Russian army did not get along with one. But what is known about the relationship between the individuals who are in charge of these soldiers who are on the front lines? After the events that took place in the city of Sadar, all of the truths that had been concealed by Russia, which had been dragged into a civil conflict by the triangle of Putin, Kady, and Prin, gradually came to. The head of Wagner Group made the announcement on January 11th that he had taken control of SOR. Have you connected this assertion with anything else that took place on the same date as this other event? The Chief of Staff, Sergei Servik, was let go as a result of this new development. The declaration was made by the Ukrainian intelligence after Servik was given the position of Chief of the General Staff. PRN is credited with having recommended Servik for the position of Chief of the General Staff as stated in this declaration, because of the strong friendship that existed between Ciro, Vik, and PR. In 2017, Vik was given the role of commanding the Russian forces stationed in Syria, and soldiers from the Wagner Group fought alongside him there. The Russian army made it abundantly obvious that it did not want the mercenaries by denying the Wagner soldiers the opportunity to receive weapons. The Russian generals believe that the Wagner warriors are ill-disciplined and potentially dangerous soldiers. As a result, the Russian generals do not want fighters from Wagner to join their armies. Things are not looking good for the Wagner warriors at this point. It is common knowledge that a very small percentage of Wagner soldiers were deployed to the front lines of the conflict to meet their FS. The situation is not looking good for Prin, who is Putin's right hand. Due to the fact that PRN has a lot of adversaries, he is thinking about supporting Kady Putin. Instead, there are rumors that PRN will be removed from his position and Kady Ralph will take his place. Putin gave Kady the order to establish a mercenary business. Putin won't have to rely on Wagner to get the soldiers he needs because he'll have this business. What Ukraine has in mind. For Crimea, the objective of Ukraine is to regain control of Crimea. If and when Crimea is reclaimed by Ukraine, the Ukrainian armed forces will be able to recruit personnel to fill their ranks from Crimea. People on the large peninsula that is known as Crimea want to rebel against Russia, but Russian troops have been killing anyone who attempts to flee the P. The strategy calls for the use of long-range missiles to take out the Russian military installations that are located in Crimea. After that, the operation to liberate Crimea will get underway. The relationship between Russia and Crimea will be severed as well as the highways and bridges that connect them. The Russian convoys that are entering Crimea will be. Explosions are planned for the ammunition depots in the region that is adjacent to Crimea. In the Crimean Peninsula, a covert resistance group operating under the code name Fire has been established. This group's mission is to educate the local populace, and in the event that Russian forces invade, they will launch an assault on them. Crimea will regain its independence at the conclusion of the three-stage opera.